When a gardener smiled at the challenge, no one imagined the storm about to break. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a golden warmth across the quiet suburban neighborhood. Lawns shimmered with droplets from morning sprinklers, their faint scent mingling with freshly cut grass. Birds perched along the telephone wires, chirping a lazy melody as if the day promised nothing but peace. Amid this calm scene, Samuel worked steadily, his gloved hands moving with practiced ease as he shaped the hedges outside a modest two-story house. Samuel was a man in his late 30s, with a lean frame hardened not by vanity, but by years of honest labor. Sweat glistened on his forehead, catching the sunlight, yet his movements never faltered. Every snip of the clippers carried a rhythm, a quiet respect for the craft of maintaining beauty where others only saw chores. Neighbors knew him well, the humble black gardener who spoke little, worked hard, and carried himself with a dignity that seemed unshakable. He did not seek attention. He never had. For Samuel, pride lay not in showing off, but in doing his work well, in making order out of overgrowth, in finding peace in the steady repetition of his hands. He was content in silence. That silence, however, was about to be broken. On the sidewalk across the street, Victor strutted with a swagger that was impossible to ignore. Tall, broad-shouldered, and dressed in a fitted athletic jacket, he carried himself like a man who wanted the world to watch. His friends trailed behind him, laughing at some crude joke, their voices carrying louder than the birdsong. Victor relished at eyes on him, admiration feeding his ego. To him, life was a stage, and he was always the star. Victor had a reputation. A self-proclaimed martial arts expert, he boasted often of his black belt, telling stories of fights he claimed to have won, of challengers he claimed to have humbled. Rarely had anyone seen him in an actual match, yet the image he projected was enough for his friends to cheer him on, enough for the neighborhood kids to glance at him with a mixture of awe and fear. As he and his friends passed Samuel, Victor slowed his pace. His eyes narrowed, studying the gardener bent over the hedge, his movements calm, almost meditative. Something about that quietness irked him. Samuel's lack of attention, his absence of acknowledgement, felt like an affront. Victor's ego demanded recognition, demanded that others see him and admire. And Samuel, in his silence, offered none. Victor smirked, then raised his voice loud enough for his friends to hear. "Hey," he called out, his tone sharp, mocking. "Tell me something, man. You think those careful little hands of yours could last even a second in a real fight?" The words cut through the peaceful hum of the neighborhood. Samuel paused, his clippers still in hand, though he didn't immediately look up. A ripple of laughter erupted from Victor's friends, their jeering filling the air, bouncing off the fences and houses. One of them added, "Yeah, look at him, probably never even thrown a punch in his life." Victor grinned, encouraged by the chorus. He took a few steps closer, puffing his chest as if to physically tower over Samuel. The gardener finally straightened, his calm eyes meeting Victor's with no trace of anger, no trace of fear, only a steady, unreadable expression that seemed to unnerve as much as it frustrated. But Victor wasn't finished. "Come on," he taunted, pointing at Samuel with a smirk. "People like you don't belong anywhere near strength. You belong with dirt, with tools, with weeds. Not in a fight. Not against someone like me." His friends howled with laughter again, the cruel sound stretching into the quiet afternoon, shattering the peace that had lingered moments before. Birds scattered from the wires, startled by the sudden burst of noise. Samuel's lips parted slightly, though he said nothing. His hands remained steady, gloved fingers resting lightly against the metal of the clippers. The air between them grew heavy, thick with unspoken tension, as if the neighborhood itself held its breath. The arrogance in Victor's voice lingered, hanging like smoke, daring Samuel to respond. And though the gardener had yet to utter a single word, the faint flicker in his eyes hinted that this encounter would not end the way Victor expected. Victor wasn't satisfied with the laughter he had already earned. His ego demanded more, demanded a reaction that would cement his dominance in front of his friends. He tilted his head, his smirk widening as he called out again, his voice sharp enough to pierce the calm of the afternoon. "Hey, gardener," Victor sneered, gesturing with a mocking wave of his hand. "Bet you've never even seen a real fighter before. Wanna try?" The words landed like stones in the quiet air. The group behind him chuckled, their laughter dripping with the cruelty of an audience eager to see someone embarrassed. One of them slapped Victor on the back, egging him on, while another whispered just loud enough for Samuel to hear, "This should be good." Man doesn't even know what strength looks like. Samuel inhaled deeply, the earthy scent of clipped hedges filling his lungs. He kept his eyes lowered, turning back to the hedge with quiet precision, the blades of his clippers clicking together in an even rhythm. Snip, snip, steady, measured, unbothered. Or at least that was how it appeared. But inside, a storm began to stir. He had endured insults before. He knew the weight of being overlooked, underestimated, dismissed because of the color of his skin or the work he chose to do. But rarely did those slights come so loudly, so publicly, with such venom aimed at him like arrows. Victor took a step closer, his shadow falling across Samuel's tools. His voice grew louder, fueled by the grins of his companions. "Come on, what's wrong? Too scared? Or maybe you know your place. Men like you, working in dirt, bending your back all day, you wouldn't last 1 second standing against me." The laughter swelled again. It echoed against the tidy houses, carried across the freshly watered lawns, breaking the fragile peace of the neighborhood. Curtains shifted slightly in nearby windows. A few neighbors peeked out, drawn by the commotion. They didn't step outside, but their presence lingered silent witnesses to the humiliation unfolding on the street. Samuel's jaw tightened. His dark eyes flicked upward, locking on Victor's for the first time. There was no fury in them, no wild spark of rage, but rather a quiet depth that unsettled more than an outburst ever could. He did not speak. Instead, he let his silence stand against the tide of jeers, his stillness forming a shield against the storm of arrogance. That silence only enraged Victor further. "Oh, I get it," Victor barked, his grin twisting into something sharper. "You think you're better than me? Standing there all quiet, like you don't hear me. Like you're above us. Let me remind you, gardener, you're not. You'll never be." The words dripped with poison, and for the first time, Samuel paused completely. The hedge clippers rested in his gloved hand, motionless. His other hand brushed against the rough fabric of his work pants, steadying himself. Around them, the imbalance was painfully clear. Victor had an audience, his friends' laughter, the glances of neighbors, the unspoken approval of those entertained by spectacle. Samuel had nothing but his tools, his sweat, and his dignity. Yet that dignity, quiet and unyielding, stood taller than Victor's boasting. A child's voice carried faintly from across the street. "Mom, why's that man yelling at him?" A curtain dropped quickly, silence returning on that side of the neighborhood. Even in their withdrawal, the witnesses felt the weight of what they were seeing. Samuel finally straightened to his full height. He wasn't as broad as Victor, nor did he move with the arrogance of a man who craved attention. But there was strength in the way he stood, shoulders squared, gaze level. The sound of his breath was steady, measured, refusing to match the aggression hurled at him. "Walk away," he said quietly, his voice low, almost calm, so soft it was nearly swallowed by the air. But Victor's friends heard it, and their laughter erupted once again, cruel and mocking. One of them jeered, "Hear that? The gardener thinks he can tell you what to do." Victor's smile widened into a sneer, the thrill of the moment coursing through him. He leaned closer, eyes burning with arrogance. "Oh, you've got a voice after all," he taunted. "But let's see if you've got the guts." Because I'm not walking away until you admit what you are nothing but dirt under my shoes. The words hung heavy, sharper than any punch, and the balance of the afternoon shifted. Samuel's silence had been a shield. Now that shield was being tested. The gardener stood still, but the air around him seemed to thicken, as if every bird, every tree, and every neighbor held its breath, waiting for what would come next. The laughter of Victor's friends rippled through the quiet neighborhood, raw and biting as they shifted closer around the two men. Their excitement was palpable. It wasn't just teasing anymore. They expected a spectacle, a show of dominance. They moved almost unconsciously, forming a loose circle around Samuel and Victor, their voices buzzing like flies around a wound. "Come on, Vic," one of them goaded, grinning wide. "Show him what a real fighter looks like." "Yeah," another chimed in, pointing at Samuel with mock disbelief. "Guy doesn't even look like he knows how to stand straight, let alone fight." The circle tightened, their shadows stretching across the lawn as the sun lowered slightly in the sky. The atmosphere shifted, the peaceful hum of the afternoon replaced with a charge in the air. As if the earth itself anticipated conflict, Samuel bent down, placing his hedge clippers carefully on the ground beside his work bucket. His movements were deliberate, not rushed. There was no slam of tools, no flaring of temper, only the quiet precision of a man who measured his actions, who knew the weight of restraint. Slowly, he pulled off his gloves, laying them neatly on top of the bucket. His hands were rough, scarred in places from years of work, yet steady as stone. Victor's smirk deepened at the sight. He mistook calmness for weakness. He mistook silence for fear. "Scared already?" Victor sneered, squaring his stance, bouncing lightly on the balls of his feet like a fighter preparing for a warm-up. "Thought so." Samuel finally raised his head, his eyes meeting Victor's without flinching. The calm in them was unnerving, a stillness that seemed to see through arrogance without needing to answer it. His voice, when it came, was soft, almost gentle, but it carried a weight that silenced even the closest hecklers. "Be careful what you ask for." The words hung in the air, quiet but heavy, like a warning whispered from the earth itself. Victor's fists tightened, his knuckles popping faintly as he rolled his shoulders back. His grin turned sharp, predatory. "Oh, I like that," he mocked, voice dripping with condescension. "Finally found some courage, huh? Let's see if you can keep it when I put you on the ground." Around them, silence fell. The leaves of a nearby oak tree rustled as a breeze whispered through, the only sound daring to break the tension. Even the birds seemed to have quieted, as though nature itself paused to watch. From the corner of the street, a dog barked once, then fell silent, the weight of the moment too thick for noise. Samuel took a single step forward. His posture was relaxed, shoulders loose, movements smooth, not the rigid stance of someone bracing for attack, but the ease of a man who carried unshakable confidence. His calmness unsettled the crowd. They had expected fear, stumbling words, perhaps even pleading. What they felt instead was a shift, subtle but undeniable, like the moment before a storm breaks. Victor hesitated for the briefest second, his bravado flickering as he scanned Samuel's face. The gardener's eyes didn't dart nervously, didn't avoid his. They held steady, grounded, like roots sunk deep into the soil he worked every day. "Man, he's just standing there," one of Victor's friends whispered, his earlier laughter faltering. "Yeah," another muttered, voice low now, "but doesn't he seem different?" Victor shook off the doubt, clenching his jaw. He raised his fists, snapping them into position with exaggerated force, eager to reclaim the moment. "You think just standing calm makes you strong? You're about to learn a hard lesson." But Samuel didn't flinch. His breathing was slow, steady, his chest rising and falling like waves against the shore. Each step he took forward seemed to narrow the circle, the weight of his presence pressing in on everyone watching. The quiet was louder than shouting, thicker than any insult hurled. Victor's fists trembled slightly now, not from fear, at least. Not fear he would admit, but from the realization that something was different. This wasn't the gardener he had mocked. This wasn't the powerless man he had painted in his imagination. The crowd shifted uneasily. The silence was no longer anticipation of Victor's victory, but the creeping suspicion that they were about to witness something very different. Samuel stopped just a few feet away, his body loose, his expression unreadable. He looked at Victor as though measuring him, not with contempt, but with quiet certainty, and in that stillness, every witness felt that something unexpected was about to happen. Victor's chest rose and fell as he bounced lightly on his feet, fists clenched, his eyes locked on Samuel with fiery arrogance. The loose circle of friends buzzed with excitement, their voices low but eager, like spectators on the edge of their seats before a show. The late afternoon sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the lawn, stretching the tension taut as a wire. Then, with a sudden shout, Victor charged. He lunged forward, his movements exaggerated, arms swinging high, a kick that snapped too wide, his body performing as much for the audience as for the fight itself. He wanted spectacle, wanted to humiliate Samuel with a single flashy strike, the kind that would send his friends roaring in approval. But Samuel moved differently. His body shifted with fluid precision, every step grounded, yet impossibly light. As Victor's strike cut through the air, Samuel tilted just enough, an elegant deflection, almost effortless. One arm brushed Victor's attack aside with the grace of a man sweeping dust from a table. And then, in a single motion so swift it seemed unreal, Samuel stepped forward, redirected Victor's momentum, and let gravity do the rest. The crowd barely had time to blink before Victor stumbled violently, his body spinning off balance. His shoulder hit the grass first, then his back slammed into the ground with a heavy thud that knocked the breath from his chest. Gasps erupted all around. Friends who had cheered seconds earlier now stared wide-eyed, their laughter cut short, replaced by stunned silence and scattered whispers. A dog barked again from across the street, as if echoing the shock. The rustle of leaves filled the void where mockery had been moments ago. Victor rolled to his side, coughing, his pride burning hotter than the sting in his body. He scrambled to his feet, dirt clinging to his athletic jacket, his face twisted in rage. "Lucky shot!" He spat, fists rising again. "You won't do that twice." He charged a second time, faster, wilder. His fists flew in flurries, punches and kicks whipped out with reckless force. His breathing grew ragged, his strikes sloppy, each one fueled less by skill and more by desperation. But Samuel was unshakable. He moved with a stillness that lived inside him, each motion precise, controlled. His hands rose and fell in perfect timing, redirecting strikes with subtle grace, his feet gliding across the lawn as if he'd done this dance 1,000 times before. Victor swung hard, but each blow met nothing but air. Each kick thrown off course by a gentle nudge, each furious lunge dismantled before it could connect. The crowd could see it now. The imbalance had reversed. Victor, the self-proclaimed black belt, was flailing in desperation, while the quiet gardener stood composed, untouchable, his breathing even. His eyes calm. And then it ended. With a swift pivot, Samuel slipped inside Victor's guard. His hand pressed lightly against Victor's wrist. His foot swept low, and in one seamless movement, Victor was on the ground again, this time pinned, his face pressed into the grass, his arm locked in a hold he couldn't escape. The laughter was gone. No one cheered now. The circle of friends stood frozen, stunned into silence, their earlier arrogance dissolving into disbelief. The only sound was Victor's grunts of effort as he struggled against the hold struggles that proved futile. Samuel knelt above him, not straining, not sweating, his face serene, almost sorrowful. His voice cut through the thick silence, calm yet commanding, like a teacher delivering a lesson carved into stone. "Strength without respect," he said softly, his words carrying farther than a shout, "is weakness. The sentence hung in the air, heavier than any blow. It lingered in the ears of every witness, wrapping around their hearts with the weight of undeniable truth. Victor froze beneath him, the fight draining from his body, the humiliation deeper than any bruise. Around them, the neighborhood held its breath, the golden light of the fading afternoon casting the scene in almost reverent stillness. For in that moment, everyone understood. Samuel had not merely defeated Victor's body. He had dismantled his pride. The lawn was utterly still. The echoes of Samuel's words, "Strength without respect is weakness," hung in the air like a final toll of a bell. For a long moment, no one moved, no one spoke. The rowdy laughter that had filled the afternoon was gone, replaced by silence so heavy it seemed to press against every chest. Victor lay pinned beneath Samuel's steady hold, his breath uneven, his pride shattered. His face, once painted with cocky confidence, now carried the flush of humiliation. He stared at the grass beneath him, its blades pressed into his cheek, realizing that the audience he had sought to impress had just witnessed his downfall. Samuel's grip did not tighten, did not revel in dominance. Instead, it remained firm, steady, almost protective, like a father restraining a reckless child. Then, with the same deliberate calm that had defined him from the start, Samuel released him. He rose to his feet slowly, his movements unhurried, then extended a hand down toward Victor. It was a gesture so unexpected that even the wind seemed to pause, the leaves holding still on their branches. Victor blinked up at him, his chest still heaving, his mind torn between resentment and shame. He wanted to shove the hand away, to stand on his own, to pretend he hadn't been defeated so thoroughly. Yet something in Samuel's eyes, quiet, steady, utterly devoid of mockery, cut through the storm in his chest. With trembling hesitation, Victor accepted the hand. Samuel pulled him up with effortless strength, steadying him so he wouldn't stumble again. It was not the act of a victor flaunting his power, but of a man who understood dignity, who carried respect even for the one who had tried to tear him down. The crowd noticed. Victor's friends, who only moments ago had been laughing, shouting, egging him on, now shifted uncomfortably on their feet. Their smirks had vanished. Their eyes darted from Samuel to Victor and back again, as if unsure what to do with the shame that now sat heavy on their shoulders. Whispers rippled through them, faint but audible. He never stood a chance. Did you see how calm he was? That wasn't luck. That was skill. The words, spoken in hushed tones, pierced deeper than laughter ever could. Victor heard them. Each whisper was a knife. His fists unclenched, the fight drained completely from his body. The arrogance that had puffed his chest only minutes before was gone, leaving him red-faced. His shoulders slumped. He swallowed hard, his throat dry, then forced out words so faint they nearly dissolved into the warm afternoon air. I'm sorry. It wasn't loud enough for the whole crowd to hear, but Samuel heard it. And that was enough. The apology, though small and fragile, was genuine. It cracked the shell of pride that Victor had worn like armor, revealing something raw and human beneath. His eyes did not meet Samuel's directly, but the shame that colored his face spoke volumes. Samuel gave a slight nod. Not a smile, not gloating triumph, just acknowledgement. Grace, quiet and steady. Like everything else about him, the atmosphere shifted. Where moments ago there had been anticipation of a spectacle, of entertainment at another man's expense, now there was something different: respect. The neighbors who had gathered at the edges of their yards, the friends who had stood in judgment, all of them now looked at Samuel not as a gardener, not as a man defined by his job or by Victor's insults, but as someone far greater. Victor rubbed his wrist where Samuel had held him, his face still hot with embarrassment. He dared not look at his friends. He knew what they had seen, knew the image he had tried to craft as the confident fighter had shattered in their eyes. But even through the sting of humiliation, there was a strange relief, a weight lifted by Samuel's refusal to deepen the wound. By helping him up, Samuel had given Victor something unexpected, a chance to reclaim a sliver of dignity. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in soft gold as the quiet scene lingered. The arrogance that had once filled the air had drained away, replaced by something heavier, something more profound. Respect, humility, and the faint echo of a lesson that would not be easily forgotten. The quiet settled again, almost eerily so, as if the very air had chosen to erase the sound of struggle. Where there had been laughter, jeers, and the thud of fists against empty air, there was now only the soft hum of a suburban afternoon, the buzz of cicadas, the faint chirping of birds hidden in the hedges. Samuel bent down, as if nothing extraordinary had occurred, and picked up the pruning shears he had set aside. His movements were unhurried, methodical. He slipped the leather gloves back over his hands, adjusted the angle of the hedge he had been trimming, and resumed the careful snip-snip of his work. No grin, no gloating, no triumphant stance to drink in the moment. Just a man returning to his task. The effect was more powerful than any victory pose could ever be. The onlookers remained where they were, caught between awe and disbelief. Neighbors who had peeked out from porches and windows now lingered, their eyes locked on the figure who had so effortlessly dismantled arrogance. Samuel, the quiet gardener they had seen day after day, moving from lawn to lawn with steady diligence, was no longer invisible. His presence carried a weight they had never noticed before. One man at the edge of the crowd murmured, "He didn't even fight him." "Not really, he just handled it." Another neighbor shook his head slowly. Like it was nothing, but it was more than that. It wasn't just skill that had silenced them. It was the way Samuel had carried himself through it all. The insults, the mockery, the provocation. He had borne it with the same calm patience he now applied to shaping the hedges. And when he had been forced to respond, he had done so with precision, with restraint, never once losing himself to anger or pride. Victor's friends had drifted back, no longer jeering, no longer smirking. Their eyes avoided Samuel, avoided Victor too, as if the memory of their laughter had turned sour in their throats. They whispered, but the tone had shifted, hushed, reverent, almost guilty. Victor himself stood awkwardly, rubbing his wrist where Samuel had held him, his face pale beneath the sunburn of shame. He had muttered his apology, but the weight of it still lingered heavy in the silence. He glanced once at Samuel, then looked away quickly, unable to meet the man's eyes. Samuel, for his part, gave no sign he had even heard. His silence was not cruel, it was merciful. By returning to his work, he left Victor's dignity partially intact, offering him the chance to walk away without further spectacle. The hedge slowly took shape under Samuel's hands, each cut measured and neat. To the neighbors watching, the act seemed almost symbolic. Here was a man who shaped his world not with force or bravado, but with patience, skill, and quiet strength. A boy standing with his father tugged at his sleeve. "Dad," he whispered, "is he a fighter?" The father looked down, then back at Samuel, who bent to gather stray leaves into his canvas sack. "He's something better," the man answered softly. "He's strong." That word strong now meant something different to everyone who had seen the encounter. No longer the loud, brash confidence of a man like Victor, but the enduring strength of someone who carried dignity even in the face of humiliation, who had proven that true power doesn't come from arrogance or violence, but from control, respect, and restraint. As the afternoon waned, the sun began to dip behind the quiet line of houses, painting the street in soft gold. Samuel straightened once more, brushing dirt from his gloves, his expression unchanged. To him, it had been just another interruption, one more storm weathered with patience, but to the neighborhood, it was a story that would be told and retold, the day the quiet gardener humbled the boastful fighter, not with fists but with character. And as the light faded, the memory lingered, etched into the silence of that suburban street, a lesson carved deeper than any scar.